Canada and the Canadian police chiefs of bringing back the rope. That's going to be on the second part of the program this morning. But for the first part of the program this morning, I'm going to interview at some length and in some detail for your edification the man from BCRIC, David Helliwell, the Chief Executive Officer and President of our new company, in which we're going to get 5 new shares for free. And I'm beginning to wonder if they'll have a price, apart from the stock exchange eventually, in the beer parlour in Skidegate, or Terrace, or Kitimat. I want to really know if they are kind of dollar bills, even if they're only $1 bills. If I can flog them over the beer parlour in the Austin, or the neighbour over the fence. These and other fascinating, down-to-earth questions on BCRIC, the British Resources Investment Corporation. You'll have your certificates, we're assured, and boy, will we watch them by August the 6th. Next. Gave you a fairly detailed report last week from Premier Bennett when he made his big announcement, which he said was momentous in his political history, the most enjoyable moment he'd ever had, announcing 5 free shares in the British Columbia Resources Investment Corporation to every single eligible British Columbian. Mr. David Helliwell is the President and Chief Executive Officer. Welcome to the ordinary man's conception of BCRIC, David.
Good morning, Jack. Thank you for having me.
You are the Chief Executive Officer?
Yes, I am.
How long have you held that job?
Since March 1st of last year.
What is your salary?
That's one question I'm going to dodge.
But you can't dodge it, David.
You're
my employee.
Well, the reason I dodge it, Jack, is that that's one of the points of fact that I have to have the express permission of my board of directors to reveal.
When I become a shareholder with my 5 free certificates at least, can I get up at the shareholders meeting and ask your salary?
Yes, you can.
Would I then be told it?
You might, depending on how far those kind of facts are into state of reveal at the time that you ask the question. At the moment, as you know, the salaries of all officers and directors are aggregated together and reported as one lump number.
And is it a policy decision of the board of directors that your salary will not be released?
No, it isn't. It is at this time, but not forever and ever.
Not forever?
No.
In other words, you don't want people to know yourself?
Not at the moment.
Not at the moment. I could have a good guess at it, but there's no point in guessing because you won't confirm or deny it.
No.
It's got to be at least $80,000. You've got to be at least getting as much as Robbie Sherrill of ICBC.
Well, let me tell you, Jack, I didn't take the job for the money.
I've had my little bit of fun.
Okay.
Because we asked Premier Bennett what your salary was, and he said you'll have to ask David Helliwell. So
I don't think he knows.
Well, excuse me, he should know, because weren't you hired by order and council?
No. I was appointed by the board of directors of BC Resources.
I see. So really, you are a corporate employee of the BC Resources Investment Corporation?
Absolutely.
And I'll just have to be patient and wait and find out.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I was a little bit perturbed by some of the headlines and some of the actions involving BCRIC. And I'm not going to ask you to give me a political interpretation. I want to know the basic facts. You tell me, give me your corporate interpretation of how this is going to work. We'll start from there. In other words, how many shares are available for issuing? Let's start from the very beginning.
Very shortly, Jack, our corporation is going to issue to the government 15 million shares in exchange for the $151 million promissory note that we issued the government when we acquired the investments we have. I understand that the government is going to give away 12 million, or 80% of the shares we're going to issue to them, to every eligible resident in the province. And there are 2.4 million people eligible to receive or receive on behalf of other those shares.
Men, women, and children.
Well, there's a slight misunderstanding on that. Everybody over 16 years of age and over is eligible to receive them, plus mothers and another legal guardian would be eligible to receive extra shares because they have children or dependents under 16. And the reason that children can't, in fact, be given the shares directly in their own name is that children cannot legally sell anything. They have a right to rescind any contract made before they're 19. And unfortunately, it's one of those, again, situations in society that the very laws we write to protect people very often disenfranchise them.
But the fact remains, I understand that, and that makes sense. If I am a father and I have a wife,
Yes.
and we have 6 children, father will get 5 free shares.
Father will get 5.
Mother will get 5 free shares, plus 30 that she'll hold as authority for the children.
Those shares will be given to her in her absolute discretion.
She will have them.
She will have them and an ability to deal with them.
It might be such a good buy that would be an incentive. Oh no, it won't. There's a cut-off time for this. Back to that again. So father gets 5, mother gets 35. They will have in that family on August the 6th, 35, 40, 40 free shares in the BC Resources Investment Corporation.
Yes, they will. Given that they've applied for them.
That's the next thing. If you do not apply by June the 15th, 1979, where do you stand?
You won't get them, and the government will keep the shares they were prepared to give you.
Okay. Have you made any prognostications of the demand that you feel is going to be made from the 2.4 million, roughly, eligible for these 12 million, quote, free shares?
Well, I'm told by otherwise reliable sources that 10% of the population just won't get motivated to do anything anytime.
Right, I can believe that.
So I think our total optimum percentage application will number, say, 90%. And you're perhaps a far better judge of what the population will do than I would. You guess what percentage of the population will go and apply for those free shares.
Remember this figure, Fred. 61.5% will apply for the free shares. That's what I say, even with the Vancouver Sun newspaper strike, because people are forgetting that paper so quickly it doesn't matter anymore. 61.5, therefore, of roughly 2 million people.
2 million for.
But last year, 240,000 that would never do anything. I've knocked them off.
Okay.
So that brings us down to 2,160. And I'm going to take 60% roughly of that. 616, that's 120, that's 1,260,000. I'm going to go for it. 1,260,000 shares that will be. And that would
No,
make
1,260,000 times 5.
times 5.
Or
5
that
to
number
10.
of people will receive
Okay,
it.
that's 6 million share applications, roughly speaking.
Yes.
Can you cope with that to issue them to these people by BC Day, August 6th?
Sure. Remembering that those particular shares are going to be bearer certificates.
That's the next question.
And
the shares, when you say there will be bearer certificates, lots of people out there don't know what bearer or negotiable or registered means. These will be bearer shares.
Well, the easiest way to describe them is that, in fact, they're dollar bills, and they have worth, and there's no restriction on their ability to be transferred from one person to another.
So my snide crack about the market price in the Skiddygate beer parlour or in the Austin or the Balmoral Hotel, or for that matter in the Vancouver Club, is a legitimate observation.
It's a valid comment. And there's unquestionably a gray market of that sort will develop in the early days of trading, and trading literally will commence the day that you receive your certificate and indicate a desire to sell it, and I indicate a desire to buy it, and we'll agree a price.
Okay, I get my 5 shares, I bump into you downtown, and I say, hey, David, you want to buy these 5 shares? You might say, yeah.
What's the price, Jack?
No. What are you prepared to offer?
Well, that's any price is determined between a buyer and seller, and a shrewd negotiator decides who's going to set the price.
If I said I'll let you have them for $50, would you take me up on it?
I might.
If I said $100, you'd say no.
Well, wait until you have them in your hand and are prepared to deal.
If I said $10, you'd grab them.
I might.
Yeah.
I'm not going to reveal my position until I'm in the market and ready to buy.
But we're right in making it quite clear. We're not conning anybody. No. These are dollar bills.
And they're worth only what people will pay for them.
Why are they dollar bills?
Because they're freely negotiable.
But why? What is the intrinsic worth of them? I want you to tell me.
I can't really tell you that.
Oh, no, I'm not asking that question. What are the assets which give them an underlying value?
Oh, I can tell you that.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
The shares which were issued, the 15 million, were issued for a promissory note for $151 million. So the simple division tells you that the underlying value, or book value, is about $10 a share. If, in fact, you revalue those investments today and use, say, the market value of two of the investments, being Canadian Cellulose and West Coast Transmission, our market aggregate value today might be in the order of $179 million. So perhaps the underlying value on market valuation today might be $12 a share.
Mind you, what do you accountants call that? Is that the broken down liquidation value?
No, it's the underlying value on today's marketplace. We, in fact, if we sold everything off, might get substantially more than the underlying value, given that the market doesn't always recognize the true worth of what anything is.
Next, David Helliwell, we're going to find out from you. We've got a hell of a lot of questions to ask you. When there will be not just the Skidegate Beer Parlour or the Austin Hotel, mustn't discriminate between the Charlottes, the Kootenays and Vancouver, but what the stock exchange value, when it will appear. And I want to know all about your prospectus in a minute. David Helliwell of the BC Resources Investment Corporation, BCRIC. The prospectus caper. Why would, and you can answer this question, I'm sure, why was all this announced without a prospectus being on the table for everyone to look at clinically?
It was announced because the whole program had a certain degree of confidentiality about it, and it was decided that in order to get on with the development of the distribution scheme, that confidentiality had to be lifted. We were unable to get a prospectus prepared, and in fact it was thought that it would probably be an unnecessary expense for us to prepare a prospectus that would be out of date at the time that people had to make an investment decision. Ergo, we'd have to prepare another prospectus. So the order in council came down that in effect saved the Premier from being in violation of any of the Securities Act by simply making the announcement. The continuation of that order in council allows me to be here today to discuss the shares of BC Resources, and in fact allows you to discuss them as well. It also allows the opposition to today's government also to discuss them. And without that order in council, we'd all be in violation of the Securities Act.
Normally we cannot sell stock without the particular approval of the superintendent of whatever in Victoria.
Well, you can't even talk about shares until a prospectus has been filed. At no point was it ever our intention to try and hide anything relative to our affairs. We've nothing to hide. It's all public information in any case.
But now, when you go to the Vancouver Stock Exchange, must you present them with a prospectus?
Well, you either present them with a prospectus, or in lieu of that, you file a listing application, which in effect contains all the same information that's in a prospectus.
So you will not be issuing us such a prepared prospectus?
I think we will be.
Well, you will be?
Yes. Our real concern, Jack, was to allow all the investors in the province, not only those who will want an opportunity to buy the Treasury shares, but also those people who are receiving the free ones, to allow them to know how much they're worth. And we hoped to prepare something a little bit more easily understood than a prospectus, but probably there's a traditional investment grouping that does want the comfort of that prospectus.
How can you have a guarantee of Canadian ownership if you only have bearer securities?
We can't, to the extent of the bearer securities.
You just can't?
Well, no, we can't control who's going to own them the day after they've been issued, but anybody who comes to register them and become a voting member, we can control, because we'll ask for a statutory declaration that they in fact are a Canadian citizen, or, as is also in our Act, a resident of Canada.
So you can't, in the meantime, somebody might, I mean, just to put it ridiculously, somebody might whip up here, get their hands on all the 5-share blocks and be away with them, but they couldn't vote them or register them.
That's right.
Unless they took the chance of swearing false declarations.
Sure, that's possible.
I've got that quite clear. Now, back to the Webster Helliwell prognostications. We've got our 15 million shares, right? And the government's keeping 3 million.
Yes.
And we know that X number of the 12 million will be picked up on application by the public. What happens to the ones that are not picked up on application, on the free application? Supposing there's only, for the sake of clarity, 6 of the 12 million picked up. What happens to the other 6?
The government will keep them.
What about this business of buying up to 5,000 shares?
Well, in addition to those 15 million, which the government has at their power to dispose of, we are going to issue to those people who want them. And let me also make clear, You don't have to buy more shares to get your free ones, but at the same time as you apply for your free ones, you can also apply to buy more shares from our Treasury, and we will issue shares from our Treasury for each share that's applied for. And the price at which those shares are sold will be, as stated by the Premier, at a substantial discount to the underlying value of the free shares.
I've got to get this clear. I should have had Cameron Bell over here to do a little graph for me, but I didn't understand it before, so I couldn't get a graph done. Here we've got 15 million shares. 3 the government will keep for the moment.
Yes?
Or forever?
They haven't stated. They're, I think, keeping those to show their continuing support of the corporation.
Faith in the corporation. 12 million available for the eligible British Columbia residents.
Yes?
They only pick up 6 million, for argument's sake. That 6 million lies dormant in the Treasury forever, does it? These other 6 million?
No, the government has active ownership of 3 plus 6 is 9 million.
They keep the 9 million?
Yes.
Right. You have an additional bunch of Treasury shares?
Yes.
Of unlimited number?
Unlimited to the extent that it's limited to 5,000 for each of the 2.4 million applicants, which of course is at the far end of the spectrum of what might happen.
When I get my 5 free shares, and I want to apply, we'll say, for 100 of the other shares.
A more normal would be you apply for an extra 95 so that you would become a registered voting shareholder.
And apply for 95. That comes out of your Treasury shares?
Yes, it does.
And you're telling me that as a BC resident, I'm going to get a discount if I apply for that as soon as I get my free shares?
No, those shares that will be sold to you will be sold at, perhaps you could describe it as a better price than the apparent underlying value of the originally given shares to the government.
But at what stage do I buy my extra 95 shares to make me a 100 block registered shareholder?
At the discounted price at the same time as you apply for your free ones, from March 15th to June 15th.
And if I wait until after June 15th, I'll have to pay the market price?
You'll pay whatever price you can get them for on the market. Because the free shares and the Treasury shares are exactly the same in all respects.
Common shares?
Common shares.
Are there any preferred shares around?
No.
Any debentures around?
No.
Any liabilities on my $150 million of their assets?
No.
Yeah, there's a debt.
No.
Cancel.
Well, Cancel has its own debt against its own assets, but we, in fact, have free and clear ownership of 81% of the common shares of Cancel, and there's no debt against our ownership of that 81%.
I understand that, but Cancel, meanwhile, from its normal operating revenues, must pay off that debt.
Oh, sure.
In due course as a normal company.
Sure.
Let's have a look at our assets then. I don't quite understand yet what the Premier means by 2-point-some million acres of Pacific of natural gas and oil leases. Where did we get that?
We've always had it. What they did, Jack, was give us a license to explore 2.3 million acres of land.
Who gave you that? This government or
This
the previous government?
This government.
They took that out of Crown lands, Crown assets, and said, here, there's a bonus for BCRIC.
In effect, what they did was they took Crown land that had not yet been purchased by the traditional oil and gas industries at the Crown sale.
So that is the 2.4 million acres?
2.3 acres, and it's in 19 separate parcels.
Are we exploring at the moment?
You'd be interested to know that we've got 80% of those lands under exploratory agreements with about 25 separate oil and gas companies, which parenthetically is going to yield about, well, tens of millions of dollars of exploration work is committed in the form of seismic and drilling. We have drilled now 1 shallow gas well. 1 gas well is being drilled. 1 will be spudded shortly. And as an adjunct to our oil and gas activity, we have already bought a 12.5% working interest with another group of partners in lands very close to our own.
When was all this done? Between
March 9th, when we acquired the license, and today.
Okay, Cancel is easier to understand. That was the one that the NDP bought 81% control of for $1 and taking over 70 million in debts, wasn't it?
Well, they didn't take the debt over. The provincial government guaranteed the debt.
Yeah, but it was $1 plus debts.
Yes.
I mean, for the layman to understand. And it made 9 million, is that correct, this year?
I can't really tell you how much it made because I'm a director of Cancel, and until it announces its results publicly, I can't say.
Is there a conflict? No, any conflict, you being a director of both?
No?
No. And then we've got something which we've been told by the political parties, and you've got to face up to, have been disasters. Kootenay and Plateau. Kootenay was such a disaster that Barbara said in the House that it was turned over to BCRIC for $1.50. Is that not so?
Well, that's an accounting way in which it's described, but in actual fact it was turned over us for a nominal value because up to the date at which we acquired it, it had never produced very good results.
Is it making money now?
To me, Kootenai Forest Products is one of the classic illustrations and reasons why it can be demonstrated that government is not a good owner of corporations which are better owned and managed in the free enterprise system. Kootenai is a success story this year, and when we announce its results, I think people will be very pleasantly surprised. And that's not, it really is a result of an attitude change of all the employees within the corporation. They're just delighted with the change.
Are you suggesting because it was taken out of government overshoot and given to BCRIC that all of a sudden the men began to work?
The men began to work because of a very simple thing. They suddenly realized that people cared whether they did a good job or a bad job. And this is true for every employee in that corporation, right from the top of the tree to the bottom. David
Helliwell. More questions for David before I let you in. I'll do one more segment and then you can join in with Helliwell of BCRIC. Legal guardian.
Normally resident, temporarily absent qualified.
Don't let's say.
No, don't want to get into those, eh?
Yeah, that'll come in questions.
Oh,
and if you're a British subject who at long last will apply for citizenship,
you'll get them, but you
get
better apply.
Victoria will be full of them.
You just line up at the post office, Henry. No, I don't know.
Yeah.
David, I checked with one of my stock exchange friends and said, what do you think of BCRIC? What do you think of it? He said, oh, it's got a value. He says, but it will be an administrative nightmare, a bonanza for a trust company, and maybe hundreds of thousands of shareholders. Respond to that.
Well, we've, as you know, been exempted what the bearer share certificate system allows us to do is we are not going to register a shareholder as a voting shareholder until he has 100 shares. Now, our guess is that our shareholder list initially won't be in excess of 100,000, roughly the size of your television audience.
So that means it will not cripple you administratively?
No.
Now, what is the government's continuing control on this operation? Because there is some. Right now, they're in total control.
Yes, they are.
The government directors, all appointed by the government.
Yes.
How is that diffused or watered down?
Well, it's a question of intent, I think, more than anything else. The government, when they appointed these directors and told them what they wanted done, also made the categorical, unequivocal statement that they would not mess around in the corporation's affairs, and haven't. All they've done is simply decide on what way they're going to dispose of their own shares.
But there's a section in the Act here which says that subject to certain holdings, the government can nominate certain directors at any time. What are those limits?
As long as the government owns more than 10% of the shares in BC Resources, it cannot vote those shares for the election of directors. But what it can do is appoint up to a quarter of them.
A quarter only?
A quarter only.
Now, what is this business of control, not by Canadian citizens, but no more than 1% of the stock? How can that, can somebody not, suppose you hit a Leduc or a Pacific Pete in your 2,400,000 acres, there'd be a great drive by the smart Alex in the market to help to control this company.
Yes.
Is there any way they can do it?
Well, to the extent they can buy up unregistered stock, they can buy unregistered
but they
stock.
can't vote.
But they can't vote and register more than 1% in any individual's name, nor associated, nor can any pension fund or the like get in excess of 3%. So it more or less guarantees a very diverse ownership control, at least at the voting level.
Because we gather from other big corporate transactions, if you can control 10, 15 or 20% of a company, you've got it in your hands.
Well, you may or you may not have, and perhaps tomorrow we'll find out more on that saga.
Oh, that's an indirect reference to Mac and Blow. What else? There must be something else I haven't asked you. Oh, yes. The biggest financial disaster in British Columbia's history is, of course, and you may even nod your head to this, the BCRIC. Can the directors of British Columbia Resources Investment Corporation, if they want, buy into some disaster like BCRIC?
I guess the directors of BC Resources, presumably based on the recommendation of management, can buy anything they want that somebody will sell. Now, whether the government would ever sell BCRIC is another question altogether, but on the basis of the present investment performance, I think they'd have a hard time selling it to BC Resources.
I'm just trying to think. The stock market thing. You are preparing a prospectus now.
Yes?
There will be a beer parlor market because you tell me that because it makes it clear that there is an intrinsic dollar value.
Unquestionably.
The value of the shares, however, is not dependent on the underlying assets of the British Columbia Resources Investment Corporation, is it? From what little I know of the stock market, you may have a company with fantastic assets, you know, the biggest this and that, but the shares might be nothing. What will give these shares a fluctuating and presumably rising value on the market?
I think the anticipation of the market is to the future success of the corporation. Needless to say, we're all very optimistic about the future outlook for BC Resources, and that's the commitment of the directors and it's the commitment of the management. But very often, stock market prices on shares have nothing to do with the underlying value, Jack. And what happens is that, and again, it's a criticism that I think can legitimately be placed against management, they forget that there's a very necessary part of their management responsibility, and that's communicate with the shareholders and let them know what's going on. I think very often some of these companies stop paying attention to their shareholders and they say, well, we're not going to the market. We don't care what the market says about the value of our stock. And then something comes like one of these takeover bids simply because management hasn't paid attention and hasn't allowed all their shareholders to understand what the corporation's objectives are and where their future strengths lie.
There never could be a takeover bid in this one, could there?
We have some statutory protection against that, yes, but I don't think that in any way will lessen our own desire to let our shareholders know what, in fact, our plans and our progress are. Heck, we get the fun of managing it. Let them have the fun of owning it.
But, of course, dividends. We get the shares August 6th. I insist on a dividend by August 6th the following year.
Well, you may come and insist and vote that way, but the dividends are the sole discretion of the directors. And I, quite honestly, couldn't see that the corporation will be in a position to pay dividends for probably 3-5 years.
When I buy my extra shares, or when outsiders after the deadline, any Canadian can buy shares in the market thereafter. Anybody can buy shares in the market thereafter, can't they?
Certainly.
Even non-Canadian citizens?
Yes, because we can't control it.
All right, when they buy it on the market after that, and they buy your treasury shares, does that automatically dilute the value of my free shares?
To the extent that those shares are sold from treasury at a discount, yes.
To the extent that these shares are sold from treasury at a discount. Now, therefore, you're talking about the shares which I buy along with my 5 free shares.
Yes.
When I buy 95 more shares at X figure, when will you put a price on that?
As close to the March 15th deadline as...
March 15th?
Yes.
March 15th.
Which is the day the applications for both the free and the, we hope, March 15th.
Oh, it's March 15th?
Well, I'm targeting on mid-March.
What's
yes.
the June 15 date?
That's the closing date for the applications.
So you're going to have to put some kind of prospectus listing information, putting a potential value on the additional purchasable shares by March 15?
I'm afraid so, yes.
95 times so-and-so. And every one of those I buy will automatically dilute my 5 free shares a little bit.
A little bit. From the difference to the underlying values we've been discussing down to that issue price. It can obviously never go below it.
Mm-hmm. Why can it not go below the issue price?
Well, because we're going to have $1 in the treasury, a dollar bill, for the value of each one of the shares we've issued.
All right. After the June 15th deadline, when will the shares be on the market, the open market?
Well, the day that they're issued to the public on, say, the 7th or 8th of August. But you mean called to a proper orderly market,
yes.
say on the Vancouver Stock Exchange?
Yes.
As soon as the kind of quasi or gray market dries up and there seems to be some sort of price stability settling in the marketplace. In other words, after all the sort of early sellers have met the early buyers at probably bargain sale prices, then the market should be stabilized and we can ask for a listing on the stock
Have you
exchange.
set a limit on the number of shares to be issued? You can't just keep on selling new shares forever.
Only through the application period. And again, we come back to the 2.4 eligible residents can apply for up to 5,000 shares.
But your treasury shares are not unlimited.
Well, that to me is almost unlimited. 2.4 times 5,000.
Yeah,
I mean, literally, if say we sold them at $7 and 2.4 million people each wanted 5,000 shares, we would end up with $72 billion in the treasury. Now, I think that's beyond the realm of anybody's estimate of what might be possible.
But you slipped there. your belief of the intrinsic market value of the shares right now is $7, once it's called for orderly trading.
No, I refer back to the statement made by the Premier that he's prepared to sell those to give British Columbians, quote, an in on the ground floor, those eligible only for the free shares, a substantial discount to the underlying value.
7, does that mean that 7 will be the discounted price?
It could be.
Could be. David Helliwell, I'm exhausted. Not very good in the market things. Much better at asking what your salary is. Questions? When will be your first annual general meeting?
Probably April, May of 1980.
Can a 5 free shareholder person be eligible for a directorship?
You don't even have to have 5 free shares or 5 shares to be a director.
You can be nominated.
Yes.
Victoria, go ahead with questions to David Helliwell.
Yeah. I'd just like to make a few comments on this present issue. I have a few theories of my own. It'll just take a couple of minutes, and then after that you can either cut me off or...
I'll probably cut you off before unless you get to it now. What are your questions?
Okay, well, it was not specifically a question. I just have like 2 minutes, a statement to make, and then you can either cut...
Hold on, please. Go ahead from Williams Lake. Where are you? 100 Mile House. Go ahead, please. Hello. Didn't do very well on that one, did I? Smart Alec. I cut that guy off because he sounded too windy, and I lost the next call. Go ahead to David Helliwell.
Yes, Jack, if the teacher superannuation fund, as an example, bought 3% of the shares, the municipal employees superannuation fund purchased another 3%, and let's say the BC government union superannuation fund purchased 3% and the government owned 1%, would that not effectively give the government control of the corporation at 10% holdings because they control the superannuation funds?
Theoretically, perhaps it could. The difference is that there are prohibitions in our Act against any of those groups acting in concert. And to the extent that it was able to be detected that those groups were acting in concert, that could be prevented.
But, okay, by the same token, they are controlled by the government.
Well, I don't know whether those superannuation funds are in fact controlled by the government and to what degree they exercise that control, or are in fact not those superannuation funds controlled by the trustees of those funds?
I doubt it very much.
No, but he's making a point that if there was some kind of concerted plan with somebody in control of funds, government funds or pension funds, that you have provision in the Act to take action against that.
To the extent it can be detected, yes. It's not legal.
There's your answer, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Oh, Jack, good morning.
Morning.
I'm confused by the whole, what should we call it, bureaucratic mess of this business. I thought all assets and resources, etc. in BC were generally owned by the people of BC, at least Canada, in perpetuity. Now I see that some of the assets can be segregated, sold to a specific group, and control, I suppose, not at the mercy of freely elected directors. Now, is this the thin end of the wedge? Can we legislate and manipulate so that all the assets in BC can be eventually transferred to power blocks? And then again, I feel...
Just a minute, leave it right there. Okay. What he is saying is that these were Crown assets. That's correct, isn't it?
These were Crown assets that became Crown assets after, in fact, they were purchased from private sector.
By the previous administration?
Yes.
And you have now given the promissory note, which you've got to pay back. Oh, do you have to give... Okay, let's get this promissory note bit. $152 million.
Yes.
Whose promissory note?
Ours, issued to the government, and they're going to exchange that note for the 15 million common shares we're going to give them, that they're in fact going to give 12 million of away.
You don't have to give the government the $150 million.
We're giving them common shares instead.
The answer is a political answer, sir. A government under the British Commonwealth system may do with the assets as it will, subject to the majority wish of a House of Commons or the legislature. It's even said that they can make you pregnant by a motion of the House of Commons. The only thing they can't do is make you love the little child.
What was
They're all powerful.
Legal technicalities about getting in before the governing body of the what do you call it, the stock exchange, certain regulations.
I think David Helliwell has explained that quite satisfactorily.
One other thing you can tell me, the directors to be appointed in this corporation, or whatever the situation is, what do the directors, generally speaking, will they be elected freely, or will they be political appointments, a sort of retirement?
David, your question. Your question, David.
They'll be elected freely. I would suggest that probably the existing directors and/or management will solicit proxies from the shareholders, proposing a list of candidates for directorship, and if the
shareholders, let's say with either 5 or 100 for a voting block, voting block. Now this could be many thousands of shareholders.
Maybe 60,
so
70,
obviously it'll be
100,000.
the power of politics, such as evidenced in most big corporations where somebody has the majority of shares. It won't be representative BC citizens. It will be the Jack Pauls and the Frank Trebells and the various
Not
other...
Mr. Trebell. He's out of circulation at the moment. Your point is well taken. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd like to know who the directors of the company are.
Right now?
Yeah.
Can you name them all?
Jack Pitts, or John Pitts, Jack Poole, Trevor Pilley, Chunky Woodwards, and Maury Young,
And yourself.
and myself.
They were appointed by the Social Credit government, and they will be subject to be reappointed or not reappointed according to the annual general meeting in the future.
Yes, and I would say that they're one of the largest resources that this corporation has at the moment.
You mean the directors are?
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yes.
If the natural resources of the country belong to the people of BC, how come they don't all come under BCRIC?
You mean to put the whole thing into a corporate setup? Can you answer that one? It's a tricky one.
Well, the huge difference is that specifically we were given investments representing assets of shares in private corporations that were acquired previously and are now being returned back to private sector ownership and management.
The NDP bought these ones out. The Social Credit is taking them, has taken them over and is putting them out in BRIC. It's a political arrangement. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack.
Yes.
Yes, the question of David Helliwell in regards to application for shares. We will be away. We're interested in obtaining these 5 shares. Now, we will be away during that period when they're available. That is March 15th to June 15th. Is there any way that we can secure an application form in advance?
I don't think there's any way you'll be able to secure an application form in advance, but I think, as far as I'm being able to understand, the government will provide. Firstly, the application rules will be very strict, simply because the banks, trust unions, credit unions, and trust companies can't cope with all the individual differences that will raise their head. Consequently, the rules will be strict. However, the various government agents' offices throughout the province will be empowered to deal with all the problems such as yours. And in your case, I think you'd go along after you got back on June 15th and state your case. And given that it was legitimate, I think you'd then probably after the fact be able to get your shares.
No reason why he can't arrange for an application to be picked up on his behalf and mailed in from Palm Springs.
No, because he's got to appear in person and identify himself and prove that he is who he says he is.
Oh, he has?
Yes, he does.
Where does he appear in person?
At any one of the 13 branch offices of any of the chartered banks, credit unions or trust companies, or investment dealer
And
offices.
fill in the form there and then?
Well, he doesn't necessarily have to fill it in then, but he has to identify himself and prove he is who, in fact, he says he is.
No, when will the banks have the applications?
We hope by mid-March.
Thank you, sir. More questions to Helliwell after this break. Are you going to be able to avoid fraud in the pickup of the 5 free shares? You've got to appear in person. What identification do you have to show?
At the moment, the system contemplates that there will only be 3 pieces of valid identification: a social and security number, a driver's license, or a med plan number.
All 3 of them?
2 out of the 3. You have to, in fact, show and allow the person to make sure that you are who you say you are.
And then they come in the mail to you?
No, you'll have to go back to that bank with a receipt, which is in fact going to be one of the parts of the application form, and present that after August 6th.
And pick it up yourself?
And pick it up yourself.
You're not going to slap them out in the mail?
No, we certainly aren't.
You've learned your lesson from the UIC, postal troubles.
They're dollar bills. You can't mail those out in the mail.
If you can't get to it, you'll have to go through the business of having a nominee sworn to pick up your shares for you.
Well, the bank won't be able to cope with that, Jack, but the government agents will, so that any problems, that, again, as that other gentleman said, and I can't speak because the system isn't totally in place yet. It may be that people who are going to be out of the province during that period, or for a substantial part, or otherwise can't get to a bank, should go to their government agent. But
Can you pick up frauds on the computer?
we hope so.
Are you going to do that? Is the government going to do that?
No, the government's doing that, and the project manager is Don Alexander for the distribution scheme, who's the president of the BC Systems Corporation.
Oh, yeah, that's a Crown Corporation, isn't it?
Yes.
Linda, questions? Go ahead, please. I want questions.
Good morning, Jack and guests. Jack, you more or less answered some of my questions that were in my mind. This seems like a great big welfare giveaway, you know, but with welfare and unemployment shares, there's so many cheaters in the thing. I wondered how many groups of 5 shares will some individuals get?
God knows. We're talking that later on about that. Go ahead, please.
Yes.
From Enderby.
What happens to this giveaway if between the March 15th date and the August 7th or 8th they have a change in government?
I can't answer that.
Is the legislation passed? Yes, this bill which was passed out the other day, British Columbia Resources Investment Corporation, that's a passed bill, isn't it?
Well, it's a passed bill, but there will, amendments to that bill will be required in order to, in fact, give out bearer shares, because bearer shares are not contemplated under the present Companies Act. So legislation will be required before this scheme can be completed.
So therefore that legislation must come because of your tentative dates of March, June and August in the spring session.
And I'm not legislative counsel, obviously, nor a lawyer, but I would anticipate that legislation will have had to have been passed before those shares are issued.
Okay, if the government is thereafter defeated, it means another session of the legislature and whatever action the new government would take. It's as simple as that. But bit of an egg to unscramble, I'll tell you. Thank you. Kelowna, go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
I'd like to, since these corporations already belong to all the people in British Columbia, I'd sure urge the people to take their free shares and to buy all the shares that they can get hold of to ensure that the people of BC retain ownership. As far as I can figure out, and I'd like to have this checked, if 2,400,000 people can buy, theoretically, 5,000 shares each, that means 12 billion shares should be available, theoretically. Is that right?
Depending on the price, sir, that the shares are sold at, and I gave as an illustration earlier, if the Treasury shares were sold at $6 or $7, you could have between $50 and $70 billion cash, represented by a corresponding number of shares out of Treasury.
But you don't anticipate that in any way, shape, or form, do you?
Well, to our wildest imagination, we couldn't anticipate that far.
What do you anticipate in terms of Treasury sales and revenue for BCRIC?
Jack, I wish I could give you a guess on that, but because there's absolutely no precedent for this kind of scheme ever being done before, it's almost impossible to predict what money may be raised.
The money that comes in from the Treasury shares, and there's no limit to the number of 5,000 share blocks that can be bought.
Well, 2.4 million. Only those people who are eligible for the free shares will be allowed to buy the purchased
up
shares.
to the 5,000.
And the money that comes into our Treasury will be used for, hopefully, profitable investment within the corporation.
Maybe you could buy back Panko Poultry. That was rather a good crack, wasn't it? It's about a vote. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack. How are you?
I'm quite enjoying myself in a strange field for me.
Oh, I have quite a few things bother me. Only one question. Is there anything stopping me or preventing me from purchasing shares today from Jack or from someone down on Hastings Street for operating them, say, a $5 bill for their 5 shares, like they do with future income tax returns?
No, not once you get the shares.
Once you get the shares, I can't imagine anybody giving money for a promise for somebody to go and make an application and then secondarily promising to go back and pick up the shares when they become available.
It's been done with income tax returns, future income tax returns for years.
But I understand that, in fact, on an income tax, those checks can be directed to the person who, in fact, bought the discount.
Used to be able to. I think they're changing that system. No, it's quite obvious, though, there will be a street trading on them, and I don't mean House Street. I mean Cordova Street. East Cordova Street. Thank you. Next call. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. I have a couple of questions here. One is on the business of street shares. Since it's going to cost $15 minimum commission to sell them on the Vancouver Stock Exchange, does it not sound reasonable then that most shares will be traded on the street?
Well, at the moment, we haven't had proper discussions with the IDA, but it may well be that for these shares, particularly the bearer forms, IDA dealers will be able to buy them to their own account, and their coverage of costs, or profit, if you will be the difference between the price they buy them for and they sell them for. And the sort of know your client rules and other things will be waived for the purposes of early trading in this issue. But again, only at early trading.
This sounds significant. We're talking about commissions now to people who handle the shares. Is that correct?
Yes.
On the stock exchange?
On the stock exchange.
What would they normally make in a normal trading?
It's my understanding a minimum commission is just as the gentleman said. It's approximately $15, which would be a very large proportion of the value, whatever it is, of the 5-share blocks.
Would you have to make special arrangements for that with IDA?
I think so.
That would be between BCRIC and IDA?
Yes.
But when it comes to the other shares, 100 blocks, the normal IDA commissions will apply?
Yes, it would.
Even if I buy them, if I make the application to the government for them?
Yes, that's right. Well, no, because again, up to 95, you will still be able to have bearer share certificates if you choose. And the same rules would apply whether you've got 95 on bearer or registered.
I get my 5.
Yes.
I apply for another 95. I'm applying for 100. I send my money along with the 90 for the application.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you won't finance it for me, by the way.
Your bank may, we won't.
I send my money along with it, and I get those 100 shares, right? Directly from you in bearer shares.
Yeah, no, and registered for, you ask for a registered certificate, and you'll get a registered certificate for 100.
Thereafter, when I deal with them on the market through my broker, I'll pay the normal commissions.
Yes, you will. The same as any other share.
Did I miss anything there? Caller.
Hello?
Anything else you want?
Yeah, please. Is there anything in the existing corporate plan to prevent the corporation from loaning or giving vast quantities of money to, say, Hydro or BC Rail? Either as a loan or as an outright gift rather than investing it in resource development?
There's no prohibition on what we may or may not do, and all the normal rules of prudent investment will apply, and the directors and management will have to account for what they do and will be accountable to the shareholders. We can't make bad investments, in fact, and to the extent that somebody would criticize those as investments, we would have to take account.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Go ahead, please. Where are you?
Is that me?
That's you.
Yes, David. I'm going to be in Europe for 7 or 8 months, and I was wondering, do I make the application to a government agency in Canada before I leave?
When are you leaving?
The house in London.
No, when are you leaving?
Next month.
Can he apply at BC House in London? Good question.
It's a good question. I have no answer for you.
You get me an answer for that, and I'll put it on the air?
Certainly.
If you're in Europe, can you apply? Will forms be available at BC House in London?
Is there a government agent of British Columbia in government?
Sure,
House in
yeah.
London?
BC House. BC
Probably.
House. In fact, I can almost remember his name. Laurie, what's his name? Old Laurie Wallace. He'd love to get this job dumped at his shoulders. Used to be Deputy Provincial Secretary.
He might, Jack, and tell you possibly imagine that 5,000 or 6,000 people might descend on his doorstep.
Be a change having people in the place at all. Listen, we'll get you the answer to that one.
Jack, the other alternative.
Otherwise, you got to come back, go to a government agent, and go through all the foo-fra, and you might get it.
How about the Canadian banks who have branches in overseas countries?
Well, we'll ask Mr. Helliwell if he'd be good enough to get us an answer to that, and I'll put it on the air.
Okay, I'll turn off now. Thank you.
And besides, if you can afford to go to Europe for 7 or 8 months, you don't need the shares.
Working.
Working? Oh, you're in the army?
No.
Oh, an external affairs senior diplomat?
No.
A spy? Thank you. You're not going to tell me anyway, is he? We're just about out of time. I've got some other people. There are some people who want to use on you what they're here to talk about, which is the rope. Go ahead, please.
Jack.
Yeah.
Is there anything to prevent the cabinet, in its wisdom, putting the money that they get from selling these shares into general revenue?
Yes.
There is.
We're selling the shares, and we will get the revenue. And it's not revenue, it's investment funds for us. But no, the cabinet can't take the money. It's our shares that are being sold, and we will get the proceeds.
Thank you. There is a fair amount of available cynicism on these kind of operations, perhaps because this is such a brand new type of government giveaway, Mr. Helliwell. If you would get me the answer on BC House and the Canadian banks overseas in just a phone call, I'll check with you by phone, we'll give the answers. This is the first of a series of programs, Mr. Helliwell, you and I will be doing over the years, I trust, or over the months ahead, depending either happily or nastily, depending on whether your fortunes rise or fall. Thank you very much, David Helliwell. Next, officials of the... I've got their names wrong and they're going to give me the dickens all over again. Where does Linda hide these? Phil Jamieson, President of the BC Federation of Peace Officers, and Bill Camche, funny name, President of the Union of Solicitor General Employees. That means prison guards on capital punishment. Next.
Seconds. Having coffee, sir?
Bill Camche is President of the Union of Solicitor General Employees. Who actually did... That's a new name for me, Bill, before we get down to this grim caper. Who are the Union of Solicitor General Employees?
Jack, we've just changed the title of our component. It used to be the Solicitor General component of the Public Service Alliance of Canada. We represent the people that work in the federal institutions, the national parole people, and...
civilian employees of the RCMP?
That's right.
Prison guards?
That's right.
All the people that work for the Solicitor General?
That's right.
On a unionized level?
That's right.
Now, why did you make this gesture of giving a substantial contribution to help bring back the rope?
We've always maintained that capital punishment should not have been abolished. And when Phil approached us last year and that the Police Association were taking some action to present a campaign for capital punishment again, we felt that we should contribute to this campaign.
Phil, you're here on behalf this morning of the BC Federation of Peace Officers.
Well, actually in the Canadian Police Association, but I'm currently president of the BC Federation of Peace Officers too, Jack, and the BC Federation of Peace Officers, that's the municipal police, and the Harbours Board Police in the province have already given about $6,000 to the same campaign.
You're from Saanich yourself, are you
Yes,
not?
I am.
And, you know, I used to go to hangings. Have you ever been to a hanging?
No, I haven't.
Oh, I've been to several hangings. And I must admit that at one stage it put me off capital punishment for a long, long time. It's such a brutal business. Give me your case. Yeah. Why do you want capital punishment, and for whom do you want it? I mean, in the heat of the moment, I'm all for hanging somebody who does some foul, ghastly thing to a child or whatever. If it could be done there and then as retribution, you always feel it's justified. But in a civilized society, how do you argue today for bringing back that horrible rope?
Jack, let's not say the rope. Let's just say death penalty. I don't care how it's accomplished. The rope may seem rather crude to a lot of people. The death penalty is for premeditated murders and murders of a violent nature. That's what we're asking for. We're not asking for the death penalty for people that, for crimes of passion necessarily. It depends on what the court wants. And if the jury recommends the death penalty, we feel it should be carried out.
You don't just want the death penalty for the murderers of prison guards such as yourself or for police officers?
No, we feel that every life is important in this country, not only the lives of peace officers.
What is the law at the very moment on capital punishment? When was it last changed? You know, we've had periods of prison guards and police officers, but it was never applied. We've had what seems to be a total disappearance of it. Just give me a rundown so I know what we're talking about.
Well,
yes.
Prior to the last federal election, Jack, we were going through a period of trial abolition, that being murder, or at least execution theoretical execution for the murders of police officers or prison guards. It never took place. Then the federal election came along and the Liberals attained a majority, and as soon as they attained a majority by imposing cabinet discipline on a free vote, they abolished capital punishment. We're left with a system of first-degree murder and second-degree murder. First-degree murder, the perpetrator would receive a minimum of 25 years in jail, and the second degree, 10 years in jail. This is, in our view, a totally inhuman type of punishment. It's taxing the system beyond belief, because instead of people coming out of the penitentiaries, the ones for more serious crimes, that's like murder, first degree, it's filling up. There'll be more hostage takings, there'll be more violence in the prisons, more attempts at escapes and this kind of thing. But any question at all in our mind. The police officers never ever asked to be segregated or separated and have capital punishment applied to their murderers. Although it's fair to say, since this abolition, the murders of police have increased. There was 3 in 3 years ago, then 6, and then last year 7. It's going up and up and up, and there's, I guess we're kind of frightened to see what's going to happen this year.
I got that quite clear. The last move done by the federal government was abolishing capital punishment altogether, forever on the face of it. 25 years with no prospect of parole for how long?
25.
20. They're eligible for review at 20, and but 22 or 23, I think, is when they.
All right. And for second degree, it was eligible for review after 10 years.
That's right.
Now, can you give me any figures to prove that the prisons are filling up now with... Are these kind of murderers more dangerous than other people when they're in custody?
I think, Jack, you have to understand that a man that is placed in custody for 25 years with no hope of parole, regardless of what stage of your life you're placed in an institution, 25 years is a big chunk out of it. And I have personally talked with inmates who would rather have the death penalty than look at a 25-year sentence, because there's no end to a 25-year sentence as far as they're concerned.
And somebody said to me once, even if you were locked up in the Holiday Inn for 25 years with all kind of modern conveniences, you'd still go stir crazy in
That's right.
the Hotel Vancouver or the Holiday Inn, wouldn't you?
And, we have seen inmates on television who have been interviewed who would say they'd rather face a death penalty. And I think to impose a 25-year sentence on a human being is far more inhumane than the death
Bill,
penalty.
you'll be telling me next that your campaign is really a humanitarian move instead of a sharp request for the return of the death penalty in premeditated murders only. Is that right?
That's right.
No other qualifications?
Depending on what the jury says, Jack. If for some reason a jury or a judge recommends the death sentence, that is, the law that has to be followed.
I gather your memory is long enough anyway, Phil, to remember the great resentment there was when the death penalty was still involved, but we had a Solicitor General said that as long as he was Solicitor General, he would commute every sentence of death regardless. Is that not correct?
Well, that's right. It shows contempt for the system, and the system can't work when there's that kind of contempt
Why
shown
do you
for
think the politicians deny you this when the popular conception is that 80% of the people in Canada want to see a return of capital punishment?
I don't know. I can't honestly answer it, Jack. I think it's some obscure political motive.
You don't think it's decent humanitarian instincts?
Not at all.
You don't think the use of capital punishment is a measure of barbarism?
Not at all.
How about you?
No way.
I think it's a measure of the democracy and the civilization in the country. All of us living in a democratic society have duties and responsibilities, and one of our rights, theoretically at least, is to live in peace and security. We all deserve that. I think that type of penalty, or a death penalty, does allow the people to live in that type of harmony or security, because it does give them some protection.
You say the death penalty is a deterrent.
Jack,
this is the old hoary argument. What is it?
It has to be a deterrent. We all know that if the punishment is great enough, we will think twice about doing some act.
Certainly if a man holds me up with a gun and threatens to kill me, that's a great deterrent. I will do precisely what he tells me.
That's right. And that those are statistics that are very hard to prove, whether it is or is not a deterrent. We never know how many murders were not committed because the death penalty was, in fact, in effect.
You yourself, though, must feel insecure in your job at times because of the lack of a death penalty. I mean, one outside murder, you get 25 years. Your next murders are for free.
That's right. And this is a thought, I'm sure, that goes through most of the people's minds who are doing 25 years.
Does it make prison guards jumpy knowing there's not a death penalty?
I think they are somewhat concerned about it. You know, there's always a certain amount of tension in the institutions anyway. You never know from what corner it's coming.
Are these institutions as bad as we're told they are?
In what way, Jack?
Cruel and unusual punishments, brutalizing of prisoners?
No, I don't think they're as bad as a lot of people make out. And you also will find the inmates who complain about cruel and unusual punishment usually are not receiving the punishment they say. We have, you know, an incident in one of the institutions where an inmate was reportedly to have been beaten and to death, and it was on the national television, I think. They found out that the inmate was well and alive, and he said, yeah, he had been pushed around a bit, but no more than he had deserved, you know. And they had interviewed this fellow. I think there are a lot of associations that are looking for some recognition when they cry cruel and unusual, because the inmates who receive punishment in institutions, that punishment is dealt out justly. Through the courts and through the internal justice system.
There's no more internal punishment now in way of paddles or whatnot.
No, no.
Used to be.
There's,
Look,
you know, there's segregation.
Okay, well, let's test a measure of public feeling. Here are two men. One is the president of the Union of Solicitor General Employees. The other is the president of the BC Federation of Peace Officers, who are, in fact, while they're not soliciting funds, would accept any money you sent them to help them mount their campaign for public information to reinstate capital punishment. The campaign will start after the call of a federal election and completed just prior to election day. In other words, you're going to try and transform capital punishment into voting power.
That's right.
Is that correct?
That's right.
Will you drop your political affiliations, if any, and urge that your people vote against all candidates who do not agree with you on capital punishment?
That's basically what we would ask.
You want to name them. This man's for capital
that's
punishment,
right.
this man's against it.
That's right.
Vote against the softy. Vote for the man who's in favour of capital
That's
punishment. Right. Give me your reactions to these gentlemen. At least they're forthright about the problem. Now. I would merely like a succinct statement, SUCCINCT, where you stand on capital punishment. You see Camche and you see Jamieson. Prison guards, roughly speaking, policemen. They want it back, and they want you to shape your federal election vote against those who won't go for capital punishment. Where do you stand?
I'm all for it. I think they should be executed in one way or another.
Thank you. Where do you stand?
I say go for it.
Capital punishment?
Yes, all the way.
I wonder if when people phone they could say, yes, I'm for it, I'm 56, I'm retired, or I'm 19 and I'm single. Whatever, a little bit about yourself, just to make it more colourful than the usual Webster rundown. Where do you stand on it?
I'm 59, I'm retired, I'm a concerned citizen of Canada, and capital punishment is necessary.
Thank you. How about you?
I'm against capital punishment.
How old?
Pardon me?
How old are you?
24.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm a longshoreman.
Thank you. Now, how about you?
I'm 70 and I'm for it.
For it all the way. How about you? Yes, yes. Where do you stand on it? I'm not restricting you to a poll. I just want you to keep it succinctly. Are you there? Hello, Linda. Will you speak to me, Linda? Nobody else will. Take it. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm 55 and I'm for capital punishment.
Thank you very much. What do you do for a living, though? Didn't tell me. Where are you speaking from?
Bernie.
Albany. How old are you?
45.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a logger.
What do you think about Camche and Jamieson? Are they all wet or are they all right?
No, it should have never been abolished.
Should never have been abolished.
No.
Much obliged. There's a logger from the West Coast. And where are you speaking from?
27. I'm against capital punishment, and I work for the public service in Summerland. And I just wanted to ask your gentleman friend, since we're mounting a political action group ourselves as a public service union, how come, what are they going to do when their own jobs, which are being threatened by the federal government, that might conflict with, the other person's stand on capital punishment? like we are asking the three candidates from the different parties where they stand on Bill C-22 and indexing of pensions and contracting out. Now, all those things affect the gentleman from the union.
You put it very well. This man, his concern, and he's against capital punishment, is indexing of pensions, which I think are going to be trimmed, C-22, and other issues.
Right.
You're saying, are you not, Bill Camche, forget the other issues, concentrate on capital punishment?
No, I'm not saying forget the other issues, because I think there are issues that are all combined. And I think anyone who is in the political field has to have a broad mind, and he should be able to cope with all those situations.
So is this gentleman going to then tell the voters or his own members to vote against the people who are against capital, at least who are for capital punishment, at least vote for the people who are for capital punishment, and also vote for the people who are going to defeat Bill C-22, contracting out, and the others? I think you'll find out that there's nobody left, because the Liberals and Conservatives have taken a very strong stand on...
Okay, you made a good point, so we'll let you... How do you stand on the capital punishment issue?
Yes, I agree with it. I am 36 and a housewife, and I think that it should be something done about it.
Would you vote to defeat an MP merely because he was against capital punishment?
If it's MP or anybody else, I go for it.
Thank you, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm 62. I'm Vancouver retired. I am a security officer.
Well, you fought it.
I'm sorry?
You fought it.
And I'm certainly for it.
Thank you very much, sir.
The same.
How about you?
Hi, I'm 24, and I'm for it.
How come young people aren't supposed to be for capital punishment? Why are you for it?
I'm for it because I consider it, don't get burnt twice by the same thing, eh?
If he does one premeditated killing, put him out the way.
Exactly. And everyone knows the rules, and if you play against them, you know what the punishment's going to be.
Thank you. Where are you speaking from?
I'm speaking from Vancouver Island.
Yeah.
I'm 35 years old. I'm a security officer, and I am very much for it, both from an economic as well as a humane point of view.
Thank you very much. I normally don't name economics, but didn't I hear you mention a figure about the cost of keeping a guy for 25 plus years?
Well, it's for a super maximum unit, it's about $52,000 a year currently for a murder. That's $1 million in 20 years.
Almost as much as the school principal makes in Vancouver. In
Almost,
fact,
Jack.
a little bit less than some school principals make.
Or a TV broadcaster.
Oh, we went more than that. No, we're not. What do you think we are, cheap labor? Hold on, please. I'm going to continue with my friends Camche and Jamieson in a minute. Bill Camche from the Solicitor General's Union, roughly speaking, and Phil Jamieson from the BC Police Federation. I don't know. That union guy from up country nailed you quite a little bit there. You're asking all civil servant employees and everybody else to concentrate on one issue.
Jack, there are several issues that are disturbing the public service employees right now. And there are public service employees who are not of our union. But we are asking, concerning the death penalty, people are going to have to weigh one problem against another, and they're going to have to make a decision.
You want them to vote against the guy?
I would like them to vote against the guy.
Keep it short and sweet, and tell me how old you are.
I'm 40 years of age. I'm a federal public servant, and I'm all for it. I will vote against anyone.
Thank you. How about you? Where are you? Where are you?
I'm here.
Well, speak up then.
Hi. Hello, Jack. It's Len James. I used to be with Health and Welfare.
How old are you, Len? 90?
No, I'm 55. I've just retired.
And how are you for the health and welfare of premeditated murderers?
Pardon?
How are you on the health and welfare of premeditated murderers?
Listen, I used to be a London Bobby just after World War II.
What would you do with them?
And, well, I'd execute them without any shadow of doubt. I mean, we've had 31 years of this since the Labour Party started it in 1948. We've had plenty of evidence across the world of the necessity for a major deterrent.
Len, give me a call off the air sometime. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I am a mother of an RCMP officer, and I'm 50 years old, and I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't worry about them. And
You'd feel happier if they executed premeditated killers.
And I'm also glad that it's not just for officers, but for everyone. I thank you, Jack.
Go ahead, please. Where are you?
Yes, here I am.
How old are you?
Mr. Webster. I'm 38. I'm a housewife. I'm also a travel agent.
As a basic principle, I'm against taking lives away. However, if we cannot have a proper justice system, I vote in favor of capital punishment as a deterrent.
Thank you. And if you look at the state of the justice system in British Columbia recently, you wonder if we have one at all. Where are you speaking from? Hello?
Kelowna?
Yeah, speak up.
Yes. Hello, Jack.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm 71. I'm a retired school teacher and was in the Air Force, and I'm against capital punishment. I'd like to ask a question of these people.
Please do.
Is it true that that the reason that we're having trouble in the jails today is that with the abolishment of capital punishment, we did not change the penal system so that it became a reform system, a true reform system? As long as you're going to shove people into jail behind bars and keep them incarcerated without any constructive labor, you're going to have violence within the jails, whether those people are murderers or whether they're in there for any other reason.
If we start talking about reform, that's another ball game, and that's an issue that I don't think anybody has the answer to. I don't think the penitentiary service has the answer to it, or the jail systems. I've traveled just about all through North America looking at reform systems, and they all have their problems. I don't
Is
think
there
there's
not a
any answer
tendency
to
in
it.
North America now, especially in the States, to go back to short, sharp sentences without wasting untold billions on phony rehabilitation?
That's about it. The institutions that we travel to, of course, they vary. Some institutions still have the long sentences that give them some time off for good behavior. Some of them are saying, you know, this is your time, do it, and be done with it.
We've got some good medium security institutions. William Head has come a long way, hasn't it?
Yes, has a
very
pretty good
successfully
record.
with many people.
But we're talking, I think, two different things here. Are we talking about capital rehabilitation for committing murder? I don't think so. I think we're talking about punishing someone who takes a life on a premeditated basis, or someone that takes a life during the commission of violent crime. I don't believe in rehabilitating people that commit murder on a premeditated basis or for profit. Is rubbish. And you do not rehabilitate someone who's been in an institution in a 4x4 box for 25 years anyway.
In
That's
other
the
words,
fact
you're
of it.
saying if it's a contract killer and it's premeditated and proven, execute him.
That's right. Why waste $52,000 a year for 25 years? That's well over $1 million at the current rates, and for what?
Yeah. Where are you speaking from? Hello?
Hello?
Vernon, go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm from Vernon. I'm in my 40s and holding, and I'm for it on, as your guest says, for premeditated murder.
Thank you, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
I'm for capital punishment. I'm 62 and retired. And
Sir, that's the last of my calls. Thank you. My thanks to Phil Jamieson, BC Federation of Peace Officers, and to Bill Camche from the Union of Solicitor General Employees.
Thanks, Jack.
Thank you, Jack.
Oh, the complications are going to be on this BC Resources Investment Corporation 5 free shares caper. We learned quite a bit from Helliwell this morning, except, of course, that he wouldn't tell us how much money he gets. Once we appoint ourselves the directors, however, we'll find out how much he makes in money. I'll bet you it's more than $80,000 a year. But I don't know, and he won't contradict me. What's tomorrow, Linda?
We have Tom Hansen, who is the president of the Vancouver Secondary Schools Association.
Oh, tonight's the big meeting on the reduction of expenses, the so-called non-cuts.
Yes.
Teachers, but not the whole program tomorrow. Webster, tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. precisely.